Yeah, I hear that a lot.
We're live, Craig.
Good fit.
Oh, the draft is over, and we are all giddy about that and enjoying all the new players the Kansas City Chiefs have selected. But there's one looming thing we got to address before we get into all that fun stuff. Let's talk about it.
This is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Welcome into a live edition of the KC Laboratory presented by Emprise Bank, member FDIC, our incredible partners in Possible. I am here with, I believe, one mustachioed man and also Maddie Lane. Did you shave yours off, Maddie?
Yeah, I went ahead and took the whole thing off. It was not getting rave reviews around the household from the family. I petitioned to keep it. It is also one kid's art show week at school. It's also another kid's recital week. So, it seemed like the right time to go ahead and take it off. Stick with the 5 o'clock shadow. I'm not like Craig. I can't pull off the mustache. It's just, for me, it doesn't work. For Craig, it looks great.
I don't know what you guys are talking about. I had important meetings with people all week long. My children hate it. I am doing this for the people. I am a man of the people, keeping this on my face for them donating the $8,000 that they donated during the KCSN live stream. They donated more than that, but it was $8,000 to make this happen. And I was more than happy to do it. I'm more than happy to keep it on my face for a little bit longer.
Yeah,
not much, but a little bit longer.
Nobody gave me a time length.
Yeah. How long do you plan on keeping that, officer?
I'm gonna go shave it right now for free.
Meow.
I next year maybe we bargain like it's like a 2 week. We have to wear stashes for like 2 weeks to raise 12K 2 week. Something catchy to raise money.
That was catchy.
Thank you. I thought it was. But yeah, we appreciate everybody hanging out. This is weird. This has been a very busy week for us. It does not feel like it was only a week ago the last time we were doing this together on this show, but it is because we're out at Holiday Distillery doing live draft shows for an entire week, and that just made everything feel infinitely longer. But I'm excited to do this show again. This is, it's been a while. So let's get into some of this stuff today. And obviously, there's some fun stuff later down the road. But today on Steve Smith's podcast, James Palmer made a comment that the Chiefs are preparing for Rashee Rice to be suspended for half the season, basically as a result of his issue with the very fast hit and run and all of the impending issues associated with that. So the expectation is that he will be suspended for 8 games. Maddie tried to make it as funny as humanly possible when he posted a clip of it by posting it at like triple speed and barely being able to understand anybody. How do you listen to podcasts that quickly?
That was only 1.5 speed, buddy. That's pretty low.
I felt like
that's pretty normal, buddy.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I can go up to 2 times on like sports podcasts and it makes completely fine. You can still retain all the info and hear it. I just listen to enough edge when you go 2 times. So 1.5 is the sweet spot. So the fact that you thought that was faster, I think it's a sign you're getting old.
I want to know, do people listen to us at 1.5 speed?
Yes, absolutely. Sure. We met people at the party on Sunday that were like, it's weird to hear you at normal speed.
Yeah, that's why Craig and I sounded so off on night 1 was because people
hang on. Don't want me into this. Don't.
Okay, we should talk about James Palmer's comments on Rashee Rice. It wasn't a report. He didn't say officially. This was nothing like, hey, I've heard this is coming for sure. It was a very nonchalant, hey, Rashee Rice is going to be suspended. We can go ahead and say that was essentially how he phrased it. And then he followed that up with they're expecting it to be half a season at least. Now, important things there. One, the word at least at the end, saying like half a season at least, that seems extremely aggressive, but putting at least on there and starting at just half a season, it might be like the NFL's trying to make a statement here. This feels like a situation where the NFL's like, hey, we had the Henry Ruggs issue. We didn't get to, or we didn't have to directly punish that. I don't know the best, right? They didn't have to directly punish that. They couldn't do anything about Jalen Carter because he technically wasn't an employee when that situation, or not Jalen, Jalen Carter, when that situation happened. They couldn't punish him. We now get another racing incident that leads to a crash, dangerous situation. They finally have a chance to punish one of these, and this might be a moment where they see that as like, hey, we are going to put our foot down here and say, don't do this. We're going to make an example. And then I thought it was very important that they did not ever mention this season at any point in time during all of this conversation.
Yes. And again, to be clear, this is James Palmer on Steve Smith's podcast. This is not coming from the NFL, but James Palmer is as connected to the Chiefs as anybody else. And when he says they are expecting at least half a season, the they in question is the Chiefs. Now, this could just be Kansas City insulating themselves a little bit and saying, hey, listen, we're expecting the worst and hoping for the best from a suspension standpoint here. We think that if we just go in and we're expecting this, again, not just this season, could be next season. I am just very curious because we've seen these things take a little while to play out in the courts. This is how the court system and the legal system works. It's not something where you rush through any of this. And because of that, we have seen court dates and things like that that have gotten settled during the season or very close to the start of the season. And the NFL has said, we are going to take our time and we are going to hand down that suspension the next year. We have heard some kind of vague reports from other national media people that it's maybe this isn't happening this season. It might be reasonable to expect something to happen next season. So I'm going to pay attention to the timing of this. But yeah, it jumped out at me that James Palmer says, hey, the Chiefs, are expecting at least 8 games there, because I think we'd heard or maybe suspected it might be a 4 to 6 kind of scenario again, but we also kind of heard some behind the scenes stuff that they might be looking to make an example of this, taking full advantage of this, trying to curtail this behavior. I don't know. We're going to see. Again, there's nothing official here. It was just very interesting how matter-of-factly he said they are expecting at least 8 games.
And expecting kind of makes me just feel like they're expecting something to happen this year. Honestly, like I know we're talking about the legal system and it takes a while and all that stuff. It just feels like if they're already kind of preparing or expecting it, just doesn't it kind of feel like they might be getting something coming down the pike this year? Like, I don't know. I think they're probably planning for it just in case would be my guess. And that kind of brings up the next thing we kind of want to talk about a little bit is the Chiefs and their wide receiver situation. So let's say Rashee Rice does miss some time. We are looking at Hollywood Brown. We are looking at Xavier Worthy, Travis Kelce, which can, first off, let me ask the question to you guys. Is that better than last year's group?
Yes. No, I'm sorry. Was that too fast? Yes.
Okay.
Go a little slower for the 1.5 people next time.
Is it better than? Oh my Lord, this is great. Is it better than last year's group knowing what we know now? Absolutely. Like unequivocally, yes. Do I think that the team feels that this unit is better without Rashee Rice? If Rashee Rice isn't playing, do I think that they feel like this unit right now is better than what they felt going into week 1 last year? I don't know. I think this team had pretty high expectations for MVS to develop into more than what he had. I thought they legitimately believed in Kadarius Toney last year and thought Sky Moore was ready for a big jump. So, I don't know. I think they were a little higher on last year's wide receiver group going into week 1 than obviously we are going to be now. So, I it's probably about the same would be my guess without using hindsight.
And my counter argument to that would be, yes, because I agree with all that, Matty. They had high hopes that Sky Moore was going to take a year 2 jump. MVS was going to, maybe just be what he was the year before, which I think everybody remembers just last year. He was decent, the year before. They're walking into this season without real expectations on Kadarius Toney. I don't care what they say. Oh, he's the most talented wide receiver in the room. Oh, we can't wait to see him on the field again. They know. They're not. Don't they're not going to get fooled 3 times by it. They're not walking into this season saying, okay, Sky Moore is going to make a year 3 jump. So I do think that they are insulating themselves a little bit better. Hollywood Brown is closer to a wide receiver 1 than anybody else that they had on the roster last year, bar none. We were all
closer
very
than
surprised.
a wide receiver 1 to 2 years ago.
Oh, absolutely.
He's better than Juju.
Yeah. So we were all walking into last year thinking, oh, let's see what happens with Rashee Rice. They obviously have all these young swings that they're taking at the position. Largely, they didn't work out. I don't know that we were super high on Rashee, but they definitely were. Xavier Worthy is a more pro-ready receiver than Rashee Rice was when he walked into this room. He runs a more complete route tree. He integrates into the offense in a better way than Rashee Rice did when he stepped onto the field week 1. So I'm looking at it from the perspective of, yes, this is a better wide receiver room week 1 because the ceiling was raised and the floor was raised by this group. And the expectation isn't just we're going to force feed the ball to Kadarius Toney and Sky Moore and hope this worked out, because that's what they did early on last season and it didn't work out. They're not going to go into this season saying, yeah, that's what we're going to do. That's just not the case.
And I don't want to be too rude to Kadarius and Sky, but the failed experiments are still on the roster. So Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore still on the roster. Maybe a chance that one of them has a bounce back and is able to get involved in some capacity. If I was going to be a betting man, I'd say it's Kadarius Toney, just the way that Brett Veach talked about him. But it's worth asking, do we think the Chiefs need to add a veteran wide receiver, especially if Rashee Rice is going to be missing some time, Maddie?
Well, I think this goes back to something that you and I picked up during Brett Veach's latest press conference. He was talking about the Jaden Hicks pick, and he said that was just the best player available, despite the team still having needs there in round 4. And he listed cornerback, defensive line, and wide receiver. He said need for wide receiver. Even when talking about the final pick of the draft in CJ Hansen, he said, yeah, there were other positions that might have been of bigger needs, but we wanted to get this athletic player and not have to deal with the negotiations in undrafted free agency. So I think it's pretty safe to say this team feels like they have a not need, but an open slot of some kind for a wide receiver. Now, that doesn't mean they need a guy that's going to start. That doesn't mean that they need something else. But I think it's clear this team was kind of looking at this going into the draft with 2 potential spots at wide receiver. And maybe one of those is to cover themselves from a Rashee Rice suspension. Maybe it's just the overall outlook on the room. So I thought this before he said that, but I think Brett Veach saying that just kind of like drove it home. Yeah, they probably should add a veteran wide receiver if they think Rashee Rice is going to be suspended. Now, guys, I have 2 notebook pages here of information, of stats about the wide receiver free agents that would fill Rashee Rice's role. I'm not going to read out every single stat on here for people listening. That's not great audio content.
Thank God.
I will say this, though. What we looked for is a guy that takes most of his snaps out of the slot. About half of his production comes from the slot. You're looking for a guy that wins over the middle of the field and does so with yak. Well, that player doesn't exist in free agency because explosive playmakers get signed to football teams.
Hey,
however,
Randall Cobb 10 years ago.
Exactly. So now you can split it up, though. You can look for a guy that maybe can win over the middle of the field that doesn't give you the yak. Get a guy that can get you the dirty yards over the middle of the field. A guy like Russell Gage. Michael Thomas is a June 1st cut. Those are 2 guys that make sense right away because they both have produced from the slot in the past. And when Rashee Rice comes back, they're not completely useless. Those 2 guys can still play outside, which is why I think that's kind of where my head immediately goes. I know Tyler Boyd and Hunter Renfrow get a lot of run for the replacements. Here's the thing. Both aren't very good in terms of their efficiency. They're really bad, actually, in yards per route run, and they don't really produce that much yak, and it's kind of been stable the last 3 years for them. So I don't know. I don't see a use for them after Rice would come back if you look for them as a replacement. So like I would lean the Thomas, the Gage route, and then I did have a couple guys that don't fill the Rice role, but I think would have a role on the team. Zay Jones, Corey Davis, Odell Beckham Jr. None of them play in the slot. None of them really win over the middle of the field at the same rate as the Michael Thomases, the Russell Gages, the Rashee Rices, but they would have a role on this team throughout the entire season. So do any of those names tickle your fancy, Craig?
Mike Thomas. I wrote about the types of routes that the KC X receivers have run and what Andy Reid has preferred their true X or guys that, they lean on for some volume targets to really, run as part of the route tree. And Mike Thomas, it's not just slants. I know slant boy. I get it.
A lot
But
of
it's not
slants.
just, it's a lot of slants, but it's not just slants. He's actually got a very ideal skill set for what Andy has put out there and leaned on as a more traditional X wide receiver. And with the Xavier Worthy out there and a Hollywood Brown out there, if you're putting Rashee Rice on the field with them, Rashee Rice is going to be the guy aligning on the line of scrimmage 9 times out of 10. That's what it's going to be. So replacing some of the alignment, specifically the alignment and the ability to line up, can line up in the slot. Michael Thomas can line up outside, definitely can. On the line of scrimmage, coexist with those other two guys. It just is an ideal fit, in my opinion, if they don't believe that they are going to have Rashee Rice for an extended period of time. I know how people are going to feel about Michael Thomas. I feel the same way about Michael Thomas, but the yards per route run, the way the distribution of his routes go, the way that the Chiefs use these guys, it's just kind of an ideal scheme fit to drop that guy in and keep the guys that are going to be your big playmakers and Hollywood Brown and Xavier Worthy on the field in the positions that they need to stay in.
People forget that Michael Thomas was playing all right at the beginning of last year. I just looked at this real quick. 439 yards in his first 8 games of the season. Like, he was getting targets, he was getting opportunities, and then the last 2 games of the season, I think he got hurt in the middle of one. He got hurt like 2 plays into the game against the Vikings in week 10, got shut out in week 9, but he was doing all right. Like, he was doing some things. Like, the health has to check out, the contract has to fit out, to kind of make sense. But yeah, I don't know if this team is like, I'm kind of a little bit like, we've been talking about this, like, how much does this team value a true old school Andy Reid X or a traditional Andy Reid X anymore? But he fits that mold, but also has shown an ability to move around and be moved around a little bit more. And that's kind of one of the things that I think is becoming a bigger value for this team. I mean, especially coexisting with Travis Kelce too, right? So I think getting him, I think he could be a decent value. Maddie, I know you had something else you wanted to jump into real quick.
Yeah, and so maybe not quick. I looked at it from a couple ways. It seems like we're all kind of in on the Mike Thomas idea, and I think that makes the most sense because it fills the Rice role in the meantime. And like Craig was saying, it kind of works really well as the de facto X when he's healthy, right? When he's healthy with the rest of the players. The other guys on there, like Odell Beckham Jr. has got a lot of run because the Chiefs are always mildly interested and he gets more than what they're going to pay for him. He does still make sense to me, but it's more as an outside receiver. I don't see him and Rashee Rice's roles overlapping at all. He's not like a guy that would fill in for Rashee Rice. He's just a guy that would work with the rest of the wide receiver room. And I think he'd fit very well, actually. Like, he can take the X role. He does win over the middle of the field. It's a little bit more downfield over the middle of the field than shallow, but he still does it. So, like, he would fit. It's just you would still need someone to kind of take over the Rashee Rice-esque role of what we saw last year. So I did want to look forward. What about if they didn't want to add somebody? What if they just thought somebody on the roster could take over that role? So I looked at these guys too. Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore. The numbers aren't there. You're looking at such a small sample size. I don't think either guy has really won over the middle of the field near at the rate Rashee Rice did. And I think you see that in their play. They're not overly physical. They don't particularly do well in traffic. They don't do a great job identifying zones. And that's something Rashee Rice got really good at as the year went on. But those guys are options. They have played out of the slot a ton. A sneaky weird one is Anthony Miller, whose production profile with Matt Nagy kind of aligns close-ish to what Rashee Rice is now. He's a different body type. We don't even know if he's going to make the team, but he still played, 80% of his targets came out of the slot in 2019 when Matt Nagy was there. Yards per route run was kind of the highest of anybody on the team, actually higher than anybody else for zone that we kind of mentioned so far during this segment. The only issue is he didn't work entirely over the middle of the field. It was a lot of outbreaking stuff out of the slot, but he's a guy. And then the last one, Nico Remigio, his stats in college, that's exactly where he won. Dark horse, I get it, but that's exactly where he won. over 60% of his targets in college came in between. I mean, they're wider numbers and what hashes and whatnot, but came over the middle of the field. It was all yak. It was all short catches from the slot. Those are guys on the roster that they could attempt to put in that role. I just don't know if we feel great about any of those.
Yeah. I don't feel super great. I mean, hey, I hope Nico Remigio is awesome for this team in 2024. Like I hope that I hope he's an elite receiver. I hope Justin Ross is an elite receiver. But again, they banked on some of that last year. And so I don't think they're going to keep it internal. I don't think they're just going to say, okay, well, we're cool with the guys on our roster until Rashee gets here. If it is a long suspension, again, that's a big if there. But if there is a long suspension, I think that they'll make a move. I think that they'll add another body to that because they just don't want to be in the situation that they were last year where they are so reliant on the production of one player. You know, again, Xavier Worthy is more pro ready than Rashee Rice was, but he's a different sort of beast and a different sort of receiver. And so expecting, we're going to funnel our entire offense through that guy. I don't know. I don't see that being the case. So funneling it fully through Hollywood and Travis Kelce is kind of where they were at the end of last year. And I don't get the impression they like that offense at all. But especially by the fact that all the moves that they made this offseason, all the moves that they made in the draft, they don't want anything to do with the slow offense, what they did last year. That's not what they're interested in doing. So if there's a longer suspension, I do think it will be external.
One thing I've just kind of been thinking about just beyond just the wide receiver group, but or in free agency for the wide receiver, but I think it applies really well and very specifically to the situation. The Chiefs are very well positioned, both with cap space and draft capital, to be in the market over the summer better than they ever have in the last few years. They are well positioned if there is a receiver that becomes available via trade, if there is a player that gets released because they like some of the younger players sitting behind them. The Chiefs are very well positioned to take advantage of those opportunities with their cap space and with their capital, because they have a little bit extra capital to play around with in 2025 as well. So as long as this pocket of players that we're talking about, this pool of receivers is sitting around here, they don't necessarily have to be aggressive to make a move, because there could be some that are falling, some opportunities that could come into their laps here over the next couple months. I am not saying this is the answer in any way, shape, or form, but there were some comments about Treylon Burks being released here over the summer. And this is not me or traded.
Yeah.
And this is not me saying that this is the answer. But what I'm saying is there are going to be some opportunities that will show up here too over the course of the summer. So as long as the pool of players doesn't get too diminished, then the Chiefs might have more options than we think. Because the agents are going to have some context on some of these things too. The agents are going to be talking. Some of the players that could come available, we're going to know a little bit about, the teams are going to know a little bit more about potentially too. So they're in good shape to do something if they really want to. And they've been this is the best position they've been in the last couple of years to do something. We're going to take a break. We're going to talk about the NFL draft right after this.
We appreciate you supporting KC Sports Network by listening to our podcast. You have helped us become the highest-ranked Chiefs podcast network in 2022 and 2023. And don't forget about our daily Substack newsletter, the best written analysis you can find on the Chiefs straight to your inbox every day. kcsn.substack.com.
Again, it's KC Laboratory presented by Emprise Bank, member FDIC, our incredible partners in Possible here. They've been a day one and they've been absolutely wonderful to work with. If you have any banking needs whatsoever, go check them out. They are the absolute best. Let's move on to the NFL draft a little bit. We are a little bit less than a week removed from the Chiefs adding Xavier Worthy onto their roster. We've seen them make several other picks since then. Maddie, you've had some time to process. You've had some time to sleep. You've had some time to shave that mustache. How are we feeling?
I mean, it's still good. It's a good draft. I think they found a lot of quality values. They made small trade ups when they wanted to secure their players. Do I think that they were necessary given how things played out. I don't know. Like, well, that's those things we will never know, but nothing was given up that was too much of a price to secure the players they wanted at the top of the draft, and it mattered. I thought it was interesting, and I still do. And it's lying season, but also like it's kind of a known fact. This draft wasn't like deep. This draft didn't have a lot of depth. There were just, in fact, less players in this draft or eligible for this draft than usual. And the Chiefs were kind of okay with loading up with later round picks. Like the concept of that going in sounds pretty, not scary, but sounds a little out of left field. But the way the draft played out, I think ended up going pretty well. The positions they attacked, given our conversation to start this show, yeah, I wish they would have probably added another wide receiver. The problem is they wanted to, I think, add one of these athletic tight ends in round 4. So they got Jared Wiley, great pick, not saying I want it to change. The next thing is Jaden Hicks' value was just simply too good. There's a lot of people out there that had him as a near top 50 player in this draft. How are you going to pass him at that point? And by the time they came back up again in the 5th round, any of the remaining wide receivers that kind of would, move the needle at all were already gone. Didn't make a lot of sense from there. So, I mean, it's a tiny quibble that I have with the draft, but I do think given what we started the show with, it would have been nice to see another wide receiver join this group.
Yeah, and it kind of sounded like, again, you read between the lines a little bit, you hear, oh, Jaden Hicks there at pick 133, like we couldn't not take him. Like he was at the top of our board. This was best player available for us. We love the fit. I do as well. One of my favorite picks in this draft. But at the same time, reading between the lines, it's like we would have liked to take a wide receiver there. We would have liked to double down a little bit. We liked the guys that were available, but they weren't best player available for us. So they took the swing on a guy that might be able to contribute, a guy that maybe, as we talked about on the draft show, we saw mocked as early as, round 2 in some drafts. Dane Brugler's safety 1 in this draft, So getting him there is extreme value, and I don't disagree with the pick, but yes, they're not coming out with 2 wide receivers matters. I loved coming out with 2 interior offensive linemen. I don't know that, Hansen and Nourzad are ever going to be high-level starters in the NFL, but that's how they need that depth. They've been lacking at that depth for a little while now. Maybe a Mike Caliendo steps into a starting role in the future with a Hunter Nourzad, and now all of a sudden you've got a nice group of interior offensive linemen there. I liked those swings. They were clearly looking forward at those couple of picks there. They were looking forward at Jared Wiley a little bit, not only having 1 tight end on the roster beyond this year. And hey, congratulations to Travis Kelce catching a 2-year deal, ripping up the old one and getting a little bit more money. They need another guy to try and kind of help out in that tight end room in 2025. So I liked all the picks in a vacuum. I was very happy with the positions addressed, with the picks that they used them on. I thought that they found the sweet spots again in the draft. They really did a good job with that, but really would have liked to see another pass catcher, wide receiver specifically, to add to this room. But that may be more of how I view the room, maybe than how Brett Veach and Andy Reid view the room.
I'm double checking the list here real quick. All right, so
did you check it twice?
I did. I checked it twice.
Was it
one thing, you don't want to know? I checked the receiver list, and I think Maddie might have been the first one to bring this up. So credit if it was you, Matthew. But we were talking through this, and here's the list of receivers that went between when the Chiefs selected Jaden Hicks and when they selected Anthony Nourzad. Or Hunter Nourzad. Sorry, I'm reading Anthony's name right now. Jacob Cowing, Anthony Gold, Aeneas Smith, Jamari Thrash. Now, those 4 are players that have there's a couple of those that has some return ability, some yak ability. Like Aeneas Smith, Anthony Gold could be return players. Jacob Cowing potentially could be doing that in some role too. I don't think Jamari Thrash is going to be like that at the next level. You're talking about, those are the 4 receivers that went between Hicks and Nourzad. So they had a chance to draft any other receiver after that if they really wanted to. So we hear those comments made about, we would have liked to, maybe we would have liked a receiver at 133, but the value was too good. So that's the pool of players, I guess. Like,
I
is
guess.
that a
Yeah.
fair? Is that a relatively fair assessment?
No, that's fair. And I think Anthony Gould was a guy that we saw connected to the Chiefs a lot. Again, might have been a receiver, just, a vertical guy, maybe get the ball in his hands and see what happens sort of deal. Like, I can see how he fits. I can see how that works. I mean, the one that really gets me wasn't taken in that range. It was Malik Washington going to round 6.
Yeah.
It still pains me that he was on the board that many times and the Chiefs passed on him. That, whatever, that's fine. But
especially if they wanted a direct Rashee Rice replacement too.
Correct.
Now,
correct. That's what I was going to say. Yeah.
That led me to the point though as well. I don't think, and this is where I was going with this, I don't know if they sign a vet or if they don't. I don't know if they bring in somebody else, I don't know if the goal would be looking for a direct Rashee Rice replacement, because there were some on the board. Those were the wide receivers that were still available as the draft went on, none more so than a Malik Washington. So if you didn't see a way for him to fit great with Rashee Rice and coexist at the same time, I would understand not taking that draft pick for the potential of a suspension this year, next year, whatever it may be. But like, still, he is the one guy that I think a lot of Chiefs fans, and I'll throw a Taj Washington in there too. I think those are some names that some Chiefs fans might be like, oh, they still could have got these guys instead of some other players.
Yeah, but that's kind of where it was. They had that opportunity to do that. I do think it was Anthony Gould. If I had to guess at a guy, I think it was Anthony Gould. They had him in for a top 30. He seemed to just kind of be a big ideal fit for
Dave Tobe.
Dave Tobe. So
my brain says Anthony Gould. My brain does, but I'm also Xavier Worthy's a returner. They have 800 returners. Maybe they
don't want to use him as a returner though.
My heart says Jamari Thrash, because he was the last wide receiver that I think was like a legit wide receiver. And you guys were a little bigger on Malik Washington than I am. I think he was a great pick where they got him. But like, if I were to look at including him, if I'm looking at guys that I think play wide receiver, like run routes or technical, Jamari Thrash was kind of like the final guy that I think fit that bill. And whether he could play in the slot or outside, I don't know. That's where my heart was looking at though. I was hoping he fell to that pick. That's where I hoped they would have gone. We have no idea. We have no idea if which of those wide receivers would have even been in contention, or if any of them. Maybe they were already picked out before the Jaden Hicks pick came, and it wasn't wide receiver that went off the board before Nourzad was the pick. Maybe their wide receiver board was pretty tapped out as is, and it was just a potential for them going into that day. That's also a possibility.
Listen, they couldn't pass on Hunter Nourzad. I mean, just to be clear, it was inevitable. They had to draft that guy. So I get it.
And I think, I think Hunter Nourzad can play in the slot a little bit too. So
he is smart.
He is
real smart. And we've seen Penn State offensive linemen catch passes in this offense as recently as last year. So maybe we are overthinking this. Maybe it is just Hunter Nourzad to the slot. One guy that actually will be catching passes from Patrick Lavon Mahomes this year is Xavier Worthy, the first round pick the Chiefs traded up for slightly in the first round of the draft. And I did a breakdown on the KCSN Substack. You have access to that if you are a subscriber to KCSN Substack. Links in the description of the show. It's like $30 a year. You get access to the Discord. You get all kinds of articles and great stuff out there. But I wrote about him. We've all spent a lot of time watching, I think, basically the entire draft class, even more after the draft. Like, this is just what I do. This is what these guys do after the draft. As you've consumed more, Maddie, how do you feel about Xavier Worthy?
I mean, it just makes so much sense. And I kind of said this leading up to it. Jermaine Burton, a wide receiver out of Alabama, he went to the Frogles, unfortunately, was the guy that screamed the most Chiefs-like wide receiver, and a lot of it was for what he would do on broken plays, because he had a lot of them at Alabama because their quarterback play. Now, the next wide receiver that said, hey, that guy looks like a Chiefs wide receiver is Xavier Worthy. Like, he was very clearly number 2 for me in terms of who looks like a Chiefs wide receiver. He fits the body type that Andy Reid has routinely gravitated towards in Philadelphia, in Kansas City. What this offense has become with Patrick Mahomes at the helm, he fits exactly what they do. Think back to all the times we've been just desperately begging a McCole Hardman, a Kadarius Toney, any of these guys working vertical out of the slot or from the Z and across the field to track a football, to maybe avoid some contact, to do anything but run fast in a straight line. Well, Worthy does those things, and he's faster than those guys when he's running in a straight line, as evidenced by him breaking the NFL combine record for the 40 times. So he just fits so much of what they do. And I think it's going to continuously boil down to he's really, really fast. And that does matter. And that plays a huge part in this, but he's also a real wide receiver. And I just challenge anybody that hasn't watched like a game just to go back and watch. Look at what he does. He runs routes, he tempos everything, he reads coverages. He's a very smart football player, and they are very quick to tell you that every chance they get, because I do think people overlook how technical he is and how smart he is as a wide receiver because they see the 4.21 speed and they assume that's John Ross 2.0. And like, that's just the immediate connection every time.
Yeah, it's the speed and the weight that everybody bring up to me. It's, oh, well, at least he's fast, but yeah, he's light, so he's going to get crushed by a safety. And he's been playing high-level collegiate football for 3 years. He doesn't take a whole lot of hits. Andy Reid's offense is one where guys don't take a whole lot of hits. Mecole Hardman has played out of 180 pounds multiple years in Kansas City.
He might have been under 170 this year. Did you look at him?
Yeah,
he was wearing baggy sleeves, so everyone didn't know his dirty secret that
he did not get annihilated by a safety at any point. He made a difference because of his vertical ability and his ability to get downfield and keep safeties honest. So when I watch Xavier Worthy tape, the first thing I see is how much Quinn Ewers sucks as quarterback, and the second thing that I see is how well he tracks the ball when he is running down the field. We haven't seen ball tracking like this since Tyreek Hill. And I think we have kind of maybe not grown accustomed to it. That's the wrong word there, but maybe become a little bit, disenchanted by ball tracking because guys like MVS and Mecole Hardman weren't particularly great at it, weren't able to haul it in down the field, weren't able to do some of the things that a Tyreek Hill was able to do and that a Xavier Worthy is able to do down the field. This isn't just, oh, he's fast, he's going to keep the safeties deep, and that's it. No, he goes and he gets the ball. He tracks it downfield. If it's a little bit inaccurate pass, which, again, his quarterback sucks, so he saw plenty of it, he was able to routinely make adjustments and come down with the ball downfield. And so I think that people just see that and go, oh, he's only a vertical guy. Meanwhile, he is breaking off his routes at the right distance, at the right time. His deceleration is elite. Guys will open their hips to try and stay on top of a route against him despite giving space. And it doesn't matter. He can stop within a yard or two, run a curl. He's wide open with plenty of space in front of him. He has that additional route tempoing, that additional nuance to what he does here. It's not just run fast, straight line. He does all the wide receiver things on time, gains separation, has nuance to the routes. This is a guy that is a complete wide receiver and is going to walk into this offense and be able to do things at a very high level.
Anyone that is worried about Xavier Worthy's route running at this point, the easiest way to get an idea without having to find all 22 somewhere and all that stuff, you can literally watch highlights of Xavier Worthy routing people up on KCSN. We have a sizzle reel of all of his coverage from college, just showing him in a very highlighted area, just running all kinds of routes, like all you name it. He's got triple moves, he's got double moves, he's got digs, he's got comebacks, he's got 7 stop routes that are terrifying TCU's defense. There's not a ton of things as a route runner from like the route running perspective he can't do. And it's that speed that he built off of. He actually built off of it, where Mecole Hardman has never built off it. Sorry, Mecole, Super Bowl champion. Congrats on your moment. I'm happy for you. This guy, Xavier, has done stuff that Mecole's never been able to do, is actually build something off that route tree. And I watched TCU terrified, playing top down of his vertical ability, and Xavier Worthy running a stop route and turning around and catching the football, an exceptional stop route, a route we've seen this team throw a lot of. And by the way, the ball sucked. The ball was a little bit late, and 5 defenders were closing, and he still caught it. Then, after that happened, they still got blown by. He ran all the way past the TCU corner. Quinn Ewers threw a terrible pass. Ball was intercepted. Xavier Worthy gets up, chases down the play. The ball gets fumbled. Xavier Worthy's the one that recovers it from running 50 yards down the field. They gave him one play. Then 2 plays later, they came right back, blew right past the guy again, this time for a big gain of 50 yards. So he's got the speed that everybody's excited about, but there's so much more to him. And there's so much that he can be asked to do. And when you are playing in a structure that against a structure that's probably not going to press you very much, you're going to get free releases. And if you're getting pressed, Andy Reid's going to figure out how to give you free releases. They have a plan to kind of accentuate the strengths of him and figure out how to, keep him from having to do things he's not as good at doing. There's not like a ton of things that he's not good at doing. He's just smaller, and that's really what it is. If you heard the call from Clark Hunt to Xavier Worthy, you heard Clark Hunt say, "You are going to fit in this offense perfectly." And this is not a slight at Clark Hunt, but I don't think Clark Hunt's just pulling that out by himself. I have a feeling that is probably something that has been told to him by Brett Veach and Andy Reid. Him saying you're going to fit into this offense perfectly probably came from the leadership. And I think this is an incredible fit in Kansas City. I do want to make sure to quickly shout out Derek Hernandez for $50 here. I really appreciate you, my man.
Big thumbs up from the narc in the upper right-hand corner, buddy.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I saw someone else asking a question. Big Jack KC25 asking this. We can answer this real quick. Even if Rice isn't suspended this year, couldn't they just toss him on the commissioner's exempt list until legally resolved? Essentially, still suspending him. So I think he'd still have to endure the suspension, though. Is the only thing I believe. Thank you for the donation, but I think he would still, if they put him on the commissioner's exempt list for now, and then came back and he got removed from that, I think he'd still have to incur the entirety of the suspension when it's eventually levied, if I'm correct, right, Craig? Craig looks terrified.
Yeah, I think that's how it would work. I
went to Craig first, but
I'm not entirely sure, but I think that's how it would work. I don't think the Chiefs would go that route anyway, because like that, they would feel like they're trying to circumvent a bad situation and make it a little bit worse. So, I don't think they would go that route. I think that they would just let the suspension take place. They would do whatever has to go that route and then see what happens from there, I guess. Like, I think the Chiefs will play Rashee Rice if he's not suspended, I guess is the moral of the story. They didn't do that with Justin Ross because I think everything was happening in the moment. There was no time to collect the evidence, the information, whatever you want to call it. Whereas Rashee Rice, we know everything that's happened. If he's not suspended come week 1, I imagine he's out there. It's just the league will have to make some kind of adjustment by then.
All right, let's move on to Kingsley Suamataia. We are getting better and better at his name here. Maddie, you're getting ready to write an article about Kingsley for the KCSN Substack on Friday, correct? So you've watched several games. I know Craig watched several games. I've watched several games. Maddie, how we feeling?
Okay, so let's start with what we all liked. What we all liked about him, right? I think we all see different things in him that we liked. I was saying just the first thing that stings out to me, and I actually think there's a little bit of a difference between maybe what you guys saw when you guys were watching him at the Airbnb after the pick and what I saw. I actually love his hands. His hands are one of my favorite things about him because he uses his hands the way that I like my tackle to do it. They're not overly aggressive. He keeps them low. He uses his inside hand to control the rusher, to steer the rusher, and he never overextends with the outside hand. That's the stuff I like. Is he occasionally late with them because he carries them low and wide instead of just low? Absolutely. There's also issues with his hand timing because of his footwork, but his hands I actually love. He loves the snatch technique. I love how strong his inside hand is. Like, I like where his hand base is. He's obviously athletic. He's obviously nimble-footed, very strong, very big. I think it's kind of surprising how big he is when you see how well he moves. Like, there's clearly a lot of stuff to like about him. I'm going to go into detail of what a lot of that stuff on Friday when I write an article. What do you guys like about Kingsley's game?
It's effortless how he moves. I know I keep saying that, but his feet glide over the grass. Like it does. He is so light on his feet for a man his size, for anybody of any size out there playing offensive tackle. The movement skills are undeniable. And I'm certain that's why Andy Heck and Andy Reid have fallen in love with him. Andy Reid likes offensive tackles that are really light on their feet, can move really well. Now, that doesn't mean that he gets bull rushed really easily, that he doesn't deal with power very well. There's still plenty of ability to set against stuff. Maddie referenced the fact that he snatches guys very, very easily. When he sees a long arm, when somebody's trying to really get into his chest and hit him with a long arm, he knows how to deal with it. Like, he grabs, traps, snaps, throws them onto their face routinely. There is power there. He can hold up to that sort of stuff. It's just the movement is so fun to watching him get out on screens is incredible. Like, he beats the running back to the spot, and not just that, the ability to kind of dodge a guy, knowing that he's got a blocker behind him, or knowing that he's got leverage, the running backs on the outside shoulder, the ability to kind of bend around a defender to make sure that he clears him and gets to the next one is going to create so many more yards in an Andy Reid offense. It's just, every time I watch him, I am just amazed by how a man that big can move the way that he does. It is truly rare how light he is on his feet.
Derek Hernandez, did you guys know he's related to Penei Sewell? Like, okay, so I agree with Craig. I actually agree with Maddie I think his hands are acceptable. I think it's feet tied to hands and some of that a little bit, which I'm sure Maddie will get into in a second. I'll say this, on top of everything, I like the idea of him. Okay. And what that means is you've got a kid that just turned 21 years old, that is absolutely built, that went to the combine weighing 326 pounds and looking incredible doing so. Nearly 11-inch hands. Played both right tackle and left tackle. When we're talking about this kid, and like Greg Castillo talked about how they like that he played both sides of the ball. They like how young he is. He's got the bloodline too. Like, the idea of Kingsley Suamataia is equally as interesting to me, because this is the kind of profile outside of just the tape. I appreciate the tape. I think the tape was worth 63. If they had taken him in a small trade back at 40, like we did with Patrick Paul, totally would have understood. You're getting one of the youngest offensive tackles and one of the youngest players in this draft. You're getting a rare athlete. You're getting a massive human that's probably not done growing into his frame. He doesn't. I watch him and I think he's strong, but I don't think it's grown man strength yet. Like, there's still levels to his physical development that I think will exist beyond just what we've seen to this point. So I appreciate the movement skills. There's definitely work to do, but this kind of profile on a kid is something that's worth getting excited about, just as much about what we've seen on tape as well too. So Maddie, I know you have some things, you spent a lot of time digging deep. What are some of the things that you think that Kingsley Suamataia really needs to work on?
Yeah, and this is, so I'm not going to go through it all. I said there's an article coming out on the Substack on Friday where I'm going to kind of get into more detailed for some of the stuff. But I think there's a fair amount of work, I think, for Kingsley to get done before he's ready to start at the NFL level. And I know we're all really excited, and Brett Veach is going up there saying we're going to let the young guys go into OTAs and see what happens. And it's a fun story, and I don't think that's necessarily even the bad approach. I think it's the timing works out well with a veteran that might know the playbook coming in for, I don't know, training camp versus OTAs. But watching Suamataia play, it looks like a long walk to see a guy ready to start at the NFL level. Just starting with the basics, BYU is like pure RPOs. There's so few legitimate drop back pass sets, and most of them come in garbage time when they're either way up or the other team's way up, and there's a lot of backups on the field. There's a lot of just like, oh, let's see what happens. Go ahead, Greg.
And just really to jump in here, because I know people are going to listen to that and go, oh, the Chiefs run lots of RPOs. Yes, they do, but they run significantly more drop back passes. So go right ahead. Yes.
Let me be really clear. A college offense that's mostly RPOs means like 85% of their snaps are RPOs.
Correct.
An NFL offense that runs mostly RPOs is like 12%. There's a big gap in here. And then even when you watch his past sets, they're almost all quick sets or 45-degree angle sets. There are so few vertical sets that you can go back and look at, and the Chiefs love to vertical set out of their offensive tackles. So there's just general things that he's not even had to do at the college level that he's going to be asked to do in the NFL. So like, that's a first hurdle. But the bigger one, and this is the one that really slows me down, is his footwork reminds me of Garrett Bowles, early career Garrett Bowles. And we're Chiefs fans. We watched him twice a year, every single year, and everybody remembers him. 2 steps into his pass set, his ass was facing the sideline, not the QB. And Kingsley does the same thing repeatedly. He steps his post foot up to his slide foot and turns his hips after 2 to 3 steps routinely. And this leads to him getting beat to the inside a lot, because now you can't slide back inside. If your hands get cleared, and this is where the problem comes in if your hands are late, if it gets cleared because it's late, you have no way to defend an inside move because your hips are tilted the wrong way. I don't know if this is because he's only playing left tackle for this 1 year at BYU and he's getting used to that side. I don't know if he isn't trusting his flexibility to just drop and get some depth, or if it's just a little bit of being uncomfortable in space. Because I think you see it when he climbs the second level. He doesn't do a great job of repositioning his body on the move at the second level to connect his blocks onto linebackers. I'm not saying it's stiffness. I just wonder if he's still trying to figure out, to Kent's point, grow into his body and get comfortable in space. And right now he's just getting out there. His hip angles are really bad. His feet are inconsistent in terms of where his post foot lands after the slide, before the slide. And I think it just rolls into kind of a domino effect of issues he has. And now that these things can't be corrected over time, I don't want to say this is like a death sentence. I like a lot of what he does. I think his hands are good. He can be impactful early on, even without completely fixing this stuff. Again, look at Garrett Bowles. It took him 4 years, but it's not like he completely fixed his footwork. And he's a fine starting NFL left tackle. But early on, you put that guy out there at left tackle in the NFL, and he's going to keep doing that same hip tilt, not being completely used to vertical setting. I just think you're asking for a lot of trouble learning on the go for him in that position.
Yeah, and one of the things when I was doing the Andy Heck, like the breaking down what Andy Heck wants from his offensive lineman last, off season. If you want to read that and you have a subscription to the KCSM Substack, just keep scrolling, scroll down, scroll back. That's all there from last summer. You can read that entire series. But the thing that he always starts with is building the pocket and basically having your ass pointed at the focal point of where the quarterback is going to be in his drop. So if it's a longer drop, you want everybody kind of intersecting in the same spot in the backfield. If it's a quick set, you want it intersecting in the same spot as the backfield. Kingsley does not do that. He does not have that in his arsenal. He is opened way more. He's got the hips swung out. His ass is pointed more towards maybe the right guard if he's playing left tackle. And that's what Maddie's referring to there. That is how Andy Heck builds that. That is one of the core tenets of what he is going to basically slam into Kingsley's head over the next several months here. So that is one that I'm really paying attention to, because it's a problem. And they hate offensive tackles that get beat on the inside. This is a key way to try and fix it. If we see him in training camp and that looks better already, I'm getting excited, because the learning curve is pretty steep to get into the NFL, and it's especially steep when you haven't taken a whole bunch of true pass sets. But as we said on the live stream, as we said in the post-draft show, offensive tackle coaches will basically hammer this home. You always have to teach guys technique. You always have to teach them how you want them to do things. It's about how they learn. So if Kingsley's already fixed that, by the time you get to training camp, you can start feeling like, oh, maybe this is a year one thing. Maybe this is something that they can work with a little bit more, because he's already kind of come up to speed on one of the biggest things that would be an Andy Heck no-no in this offense.
Yeah, and it was a little bit hit or miss. I think he looked better from the Senior Bowl. I don't know if you guys have watched any Senior Bowl tape since it, but he looked a little bit better in the Senior Bowl. That's really the only mile marker we really have outside of the season to even get a look, but it was still very much hit or miss and very much inconsistent. So that's, you got, you're seeing that maybe he's been working on some of that stuff. Like, I actually think some of the one-on-ones, he actually did a better job, protecting his inside hand a little bit. But you have to, like, those are like the mile markers you have in the context clues. And it's, maybe a little bit of improvement, but it was still very much up and down. And it's not that he has to be a finished product to get on the field, but he has to be enough to be trusted. And that's a big bar to clear still for him. And I think that's the truth. It's like, it's not that he's got to be, a polished product ready to jump on the field. He just has to be better than Wanya Morris.
Well, and that's a good way to put it, because I've made the comparison like, hey, Lucas Niang, Wanya Morris, these are other developmental tackles, and that's why I didn't love it. Kingsley in round 1 going into the draft. That's why I didn't love some of these other guys. Not necessarily farther along, but what has to be fixed here isn't as much as I think with those guys, because I like the hands. I like the talent, the foot quickness, the fluidity that is there and that is available, the explosion out of the stance. You look at Morris and like watch him get into a slide, it's choppy. And like you're like, okay, what do I need to teach him to make up for a little bit of this choppy footwork? You watch Lucas Niang and he has to overextend to get depth. And you're like, okay, how do I have to coach him to not overextend, number one, but then number two, how to still make up that gap. With Kingsley, it's not so much that there's anything he can't do. It's just right now, his memory pattern, like his muscle memory, is that vertical set that doesn't get any depth. You can vertical set a bunch, but still get depth. He just doesn't get depth. And then he opens his hips, and you got to fix that from the get-go. And I sometimes wonder if he just doesn't have a great feel for the spacing, because he gets so far away from his guard on these. And I've tried to watch the right tackle a little bit at BYU just to see if it's consistent, and he doesn't do it quite as bad. So it's just, I wonder if there's some issues, and it's especially when he goes up against a wide aligned defender, he gets real wide no matter what. And he gives a massive gap between him and the left tackle. Joe Thuney's great. He's going to be able to help whoever plays next to him a lot. Some of these gaps that are left in that B gap though right now are just so big that it's very fixable stuff. I just don't know how promising I think it is to fix it in 1 year, because some of it is technique and some of it's mental. And to have to fix both of those in one off season, that's where I start to, be like, maybe it would be better to let him sit a year and learn. And so that's like, to Kent's point, if he's better than Wanya Morris, you throw him out there, or you get somebody else to come in and set that new floor. It's just a lot of good tools. I just think there's a little bit of a building block, a couple hurdles to get over to get there to it.
And I think that's like the appropriate way to frame it. I like that. He's got to accomplish some of these things before they're going to feel comfortable throwing him out there.
Yeah.
And he's had 6 months. He's going to have another 3 months to try to get to those points, but it is a lot to do. And it's a lot. It's a big undertaking. It does seem though that the Chiefs feel pretty comfortable as it sits to let Wanya Morris, who we saw play last year at left tackle, and Kingsley Suamataia kind of battle out for this opportunity here. It does feel like this is the plan. It doesn't seem like they're trying to bring Donovan Smith back. I think they're really wanting to give these two guys a hard look, and try to find one of these guys and put one of them on the field. So hopefully one of them wins it out. I hope it's Kingsley.
That's the perfect scenario. Is he comes out and he blows it away and he's clearly the best guy. Not even a hesitation. I just wonder, is being better than Wanya Morris during OTAs, and this is not a knock on Wanya Morris, but from what we saw of Wanya Morris last year, he was not a starting caliber tackle. And if we're just talking about OTAs, is being better than that going to show you enough to feel super comfortable? I don't know. Only they can answer that, right? Only they'll be able to answer that. That's why I like the concept of having a vet that provides a known commodity as a floor to try to beat out. But obviously the best is Kingsley comes in, oh, hey, it's not that I can't vertical set. They just didn't ask me. I got this in the bag. He threw a couple out late in the Iowa State game, and Iowa State doesn't really challenge you with wide rushers. So it's hard to see, was he doing it in slow motion because there was no threat, or was he doing it in slow motion because he's not used to it? Like, I couldn't tell because of the defense he was going up against, but he comes out, he can do that. Now, all of a sudden, we fixed our hip issue, because when you're doing a vertical set, your hips are going to be set better as is. And now we're just worried about late hands. I have no doubts that Andy Heck can fix that in one off season and have him ready to start. We won't see that until they get to OTAs. That's why I wonder if they're like, we'll let Suamataia fight this out in OTAs. And then maybe once training camp comes around, if we still don't know what we have, then we can bring back a veteran. That would be my thought on what the plan is.
Yep.
I do want to tag up with this, because Sophie is exactly correct here. The Chiefs felt comfortable with Tony as wide receiver 1 last year, and size about that. Full agree. I'm looking at the position coach for each one of those groups though, and I have a lot more trust in Andy Heck evaluating the offensive line room and saying, we need another guy, or this guy's better than this guy, because he's been right 9 times out of 10. Like, it is very rare that we see Andy Heck say, nah, we're just going to go ahead and ride with that guy. That's just not his MO there. He is consistently trying to get the best 5 on the field. So yes, totally agree with you there. But at the same time, I think Andy Heck's raising his hand and saying, we need help in this room a lot sooner than maybe a Connor Embry was ready to do in year one as a wide receiver coach last year.
Did you see the video Xavier Worthy dapping up Joe Blameyer with Connor Embry not to be seen?
I did.
Yeah. One thing that, and one other thought, Greg Castillo really talked about how much they liked Kingsley on the board and retaining information. So, like, that's another advantage that hopefully that will translate to being able to pick some of the things and taking the coaching well that they want him to accomplish, because that would be quite fun. And this last hour has been quite fun. Thank you all so much for listening. We appreciate you. We love you. We'll catch you later. Under an hour.